September 27, 1942, Murmansk Harbor, Soviet Union. The cold wind pierces through your skin, seeping into your clothing, and it feels like you're standing on solid ice. A sergeant, Alexander Petrov, a T-34 leader with dried-up knuckles, pulls his iconic Ushanka titer, merely to witness a false miracle or a deliberate lie. The port is a chaotic symphony of destruction and desolation. Bombed-out cranes claw at the sky as they release a sickly sweet aroma of salt, diesel, and fires from last week. He watches the Allied freighter, PQ-18, with its flag mocking the broken pier, a ship that has endured danger from U-boats and Luftwaffe. The message from command was straightforward. New tanks, American, in this situation, meant a gift and abundance. Alexander, a tank aficionado with his T-34, doesn't understand gifting as a concept. He believes tanks must be earned. The doors finally open, and a series of heavy rams plunge towards the Soviet dock. Strange, elegant machines emerge, sleek and smooth, rolling on rubber tracks. There are no tow trucks or frenzied crews, just these tanks gliding gracefully under their own power. His eyes widen, staring at a towering, long-barreled gun. Another mystery, why is the spare road wheel here? In this tank, he wonders if this is the gift of abundance, or a declaration of war on his world. This was not a delivery, or just another tank. It was an exploration of these fantastic, never-ending machines, moving through shattered ports of Murmansk in absurdity in a world filled with war-torn wonder. What kind of country sent these? Came down not as a request, but as a sacred duty. Learn it. Fast. Alexander's crew, along with the sullen junior Lieutenant Maxim, a political officer with suspicious eyes, were assigned to one of the gleaming beasts, its name stenciled on the gun barrel in curling script, Red Boston Banshee. To them, it was just Tank 7-12. The first shock was the hatch. It opened on a hinge, smooth and counterbalanced, not a heavy slab of steel you heaved aside. Alexander lowered himself into the driver's compartment and stopped. His world had been one of levers, of brute physical force to steer the T-34. Before him lay pedals, a car, an automobile, a steering wheel. He ran a callous hand over the leather-clad rim, his mind reeling. This was not just a machine of war. It was a machine of culture, an American culture that built tanks as if they were Detroit tractors. But it was inside the fighting compartment where the true paradigm shift occurred. The air was thick with new smells, fresh rubber, clean, alien scent of paint. Not the crude, rushed factory coat of his T-34, but a smooth, big-ton enamel. Gunner Pyotr, a pragmatist from Siberia, immediately found the hydraulic traverse for the turret, a gentle nudge on the handles, and the massive 75mm gun swung left and right with a silent, oily grace. No straining at a manual wheel, no shouts to the loader for more muscle. It was effortless. Sorceress. Then Vasily, the loader, let out a sharp, involuntary laugh. He was holding a canvas-wrapped package he pulled from a stowage bin. He tore it open. Inside were 5 bars of chocolate, a pack of cigarettes, and a small can of powdered coffee. Rations. American rations, left behind by the previous crew, for men surviving on black bread, kasha, and the occasional sliver of frozen fat. This was a treasure of another planet. They divided the chocolate with ritual solemnity, the rich, creamy fat coating their tongues, a taste of impossible prosperity. But the ultimate symbol lay between the commander's knees. Alexander, taking his position in the turret, saw it. Their TU radio, a solid, complex piece of technology with a dial-lit face. He put on the headset, adjusting the bakelite air cups. In his T-34, the company commander might have a radio. The rest communicated by flag signals, by frantic hand-waving, or simply by following the tank in front. Here, every tank was a node in a network. It meant coordinated fire, flexible tactics, shared warnings. It meant you were not blind and deaf the moment the battle smoke rolled in. Junior Lieutenant Maxim, his ideological certainty fraying by the minute, finally voiced a collective, dizzying thought. They do not just build machines, he muttered, tapping the flawless casting of the turret ring. They build systems, a system of abundance. A tank is not the end product for them. It is a delivery vehicle for this. He gestured, encompassing the radio, the coffee tin, the spare parts manual. In English. As night fell over Murmansk, the crew of Tank 7-12 sat not in a barracks, but in the warm, dry belly of their Sherman, using a battery-powered lamp to study the incomprehensible, beautifully illustrated technical manuals. The Arctic wind howled outside, a reminder of the brutal war they knew. But inside, surrounded by this alien, thoughtful luxury, a new and unsettling route, They had been given a weapon of unimaginable sophistication. The terrifying question now whispering in each man's heart was, were they worthy of it? And what did this generosity demand in return? July 12, 1943, the Oboyan Highway, near Prokhorovka. The world dissolved into a symphony of hell. 3 weeks out of Murmansk, and the Boston Banshee was no longer pristine. Its smooth olive skin was scarred with shell splinter marks, the chalky residue of fire extinguishers. The sweet smell of new paint had been permanently replaced by the acrid stench of curdite, hot metal, and earth churned by high explosives. This was Kursk, Operation Citadel. The German summer offensive was a steel fist aimed at the Soviet heart, and Alexander's brigade of shiny new Lend-Lease tools was thrown directly into its path. Through his periscope, Alexander saw the advancing wave of German gray, the low-slung Panzerabwehr, but behind them, the hulking, terrifying shapes of tigers. A kilometer away, their 88mm guns flashed like camera bulbs. A geyser of dirt erupted 10 meters to their right, the concussion slamming the Sherman's hull with a deafening gong. Gunner, traverse right, Panzer IV, 1200. Alexander barked, his voice strangely calm in the roaring chaos. Pyotr, his eye glued to the telescopic sight, another marvel of clarity compared to the T-34's primitive optics nudged the hydraulic controls. The turret whirred smoothly. On target. Fire. The 75mm gun roared, the shell screaming down range. A direct hit. The Panzer IV shuddered, smoke pouring from its hatches. A cheer started in Alexander's throat but died instantly. Vasily was already slamming the next round into the breech with the mechanical rhythm the American design facilitated. Load. Fire. Eject. Repeat. It was faster than anything they'd ever done. But then, the Tiger found them. The round missed the turret by inches, but it tore into the front left drive sprocket with a cataclysmic shriek of metal. The Sherman lurched violently, slewing to a halt. A death sentence for a T-34. Alexander felt the familiar cold dread of immobilization. Driver, report. He shouted. The left track is gone. We are a pillbox. Came the reply, strained but not panicked. This was the moment where theory met the frozen ground of Russia. Alexander made a snap decision. Gunner, keep on that Tiger. Load he. Vasily. The spare. Outside, under a rain of machine gun fire and shrapnel, the driver and assistant driver became mechanics. They clawed at the familiar spare road wheel, the absurd luxury from Murmansk. With practiced desperation, they began the track repair. The system was being tested, not just a tank, but the logistics that supported it. Inside, Pyotr fired a high explosive shell at the Tiger's tracks, not to kill it, but to blind it with dirt and smoke, to buy time. The radio, that miraculous network, crackled to life. 7 to 12. This is 705. We see you. Hold position. Flanking 2 other Shermans, using the coordinated communication their radios allowed, broke from the line and began a swift, sweeping maneuver. The Tiger commander, focused on the immobilized kill, was slow to react. The flanking Shermans pumped 3 rounds into its vulnerable side armor. It brewed up, a monstrous fire. 20 minutes later, with a final slam of a track pin, the driver yelled, track restored. The Boston Banshee, wounded but alive, crawled back from the killing ground. That night, as they counted their remaining ammunition plentiful and assessed the damage severe but repairable, the cruise had transformed. It was no longer about chocolate or smooth traverses. It was about survival. The radio had saved them. The spare part had saved them. The simple act of having a reliable engine that started every time had saved them. They had seen the Sherman's weakness, its taller profile, its gasoline fuel that burned more fiercely than diesel, but they had lived to learn from it. As Alexander looked at the stars through the hatch, listening to the distant rumble of the front, he understood. America had not sent a perfect tank. They had sent something more profound, a capacity for second chances. But the final, staggering lesson was yet to come. It wouldn't be on the battlefield, but in a rear area repair depot 3 days later, a forward repair depot 20 kilometers behind the lines. The silence was the first shock. After the relentless, earth-shaking orchestra of the front, this place hummed. It was a low, industrious drone of generators, power tools, and shouted technical instructions. The Boston Banshee, now a limping veteran, was towed into a vast, camouflaged field that looked nothing like the ragged Soviet repair yards Alexander knew. This was an American system, operated by Soviets who had been hastily trained in its mysteries, and it was here that Junior Lieutenant Maxim's ideological foundation finally shattered completely. He stood with Alexander, watching as a forklift, another alien machine of effortless power, carried a brand new 75mm gun barrel from a stack of identical barrels. Their own damaged gun was being unbolted by a team in clean, American-supplied coveralls. Not in hours, in minutes. Over there, Alexander said. his voice flat with exhaustion and wonder. He pointed to a long row of Shermans in various states of disassembly. One was just a hole, its entire turret removed. Another had a fresh engine being lowered into its bay by a mobile crane. It was a factory, but a factory that took
things and made them whole again. In the Red Army, a tank with a destroyed gun or a cracked engine block was a source of spare parts, a corpse to be picked clean. Here, it was a patient, and the hospital had an endless supply of blood. Maxim walked slowly, his boots scuffing the sawdust laid down to soak up oil. His eyes scanned the depot. He saw crate after crate, all stenciled with the same markings, U.S. Army Ordnance. One was cracked open, revealing dozens of pristine track links, each one identical. Another held racks of radio valves. Another, gallon cans of that specific shade of olive drab paint. He stopped before a mountain of wooden boxes, all the same size. A worker pried one open with a crowbar. Inside, packed in waxed paper, were gearboxes. Complete, perfect replacement gearboxes. Maxim reached out and touched the cold, machined metal of the top one. He imagined the factory that made them. Not a workshop where teams hammered out one unit at a time, but a vast, flowing line where these things emerged like sausages, one every few minutes, each a perfect clone of the last. His mind, trained in dialectical materialism, calculated. To produce one of these gearboxes required precision machine tools, high-grade steel, quality control, skilled labor, and a vast transportation network. To produce thousands and then ship them across an ocean, through U-boat packs, to a frozen port, and then to this field in rural Russia. It represented a scale of economic power that made the 5-year plans look like peasant craft fairs. He thought of the Soviet heroism he'd been taught, the human spirit overcoming material lack. The single rifle for every man at Stalingrad. The factory workers sleeping next to their lathes. It was a narrative of triumph through sheer, desperate will. This depot told a different story. A story of triumph through sheer, indifferent abundance. A political officer was supposed to see the world through the lens of ideological superiority. But how could you be superior to this? This wasn't just aid. It was a demonstration. A quiet, overwhelming display of a system that could treat complex machinery as expendable, replaceable parts. They weren't just sending tanks. They were sending the entire ecosystem that created and sustained them. He turned to Alexander, his face pale. The words that escaped him were not from any political manual. They were raw, human, and full of a dreadful awe. "They are not just fighting the Germans," Maxim whispered, his gaze sweeping over the forest of crates, the bustling cranes, the rows of resurrected tanks. "They are fighting the very concept of scarcity. We bleed for every kilometer. They manufacture victory. How do you defeat an enemy for whom a tank is not a precious weapon, but a consumable item?" Alexander watched a freshly repaired Sherman, its new coat of paint gleaming in the afternoon sun, roar to life and drive out of the depot back toward the thunder of the front. It had taken less than a day. He thought of his old T-34, a beloved, brutal piece of his motherland. He thought of the American tank, a generous, complex gift from a distant, unimaginable planet. Both would fight. Both would burn. But only one of them came with a spare part, a radio to call for help, and a system that promised it could be rebuilt tomorrow. The lesson was no longer about technology. It was about a future where war was no longer a test of spirit, but a brutal accounting of industrial output. And as the sun glinted off 10,000 identical gears in 10,000 identical crates, the two Soviets stood in the heart of the miracle, feeling smaller than ever before. END.